Nighttime London was like an ancient, enchanted maze. Its streets weren't just filled with buildings, but with stories hidden from the sight of most. For me, and for the 40 elephants, this was a world where every step, every glance could be decisive. We weren't just people here. We were part of its shadows. The city devoured us, and we, in turn, absorbed it. The city lived its own life, oblivious to us. Thousands of people passed by each day, often unaware that invisible forces were guiding their reality. I was one of those forces. Instead of battling the system, we learned to work with it. We knew that our weapon was cleverness, and our strength lay in being hidden. Mary Carr always said, "Strength isn't about being seen. Strength is in being invisible." These words became the motto of our group. We weren't just physically unseen, we were psychologically so. We knew how to create illusions, to make others forget we existed, as though we were ghosts in the city. We became a part of its night, and we were always ready to melt into those shadows, like a drop of water into an ocean. But despite all our skills, I knew that at any moment, something could go wrong. And that's when I had to be especially alert. Everything around us felt like a taut rope. One wrong move and everything could collapse. The night, as always, felt alive. It was dark, dangerous, and tempting. There was no place for the weak in it, but it was precisely in this darkness that we felt our power. I had always loved the streets of London at night. Beneath the streetlights, amid the chaos and bustle, I could be myself without worrying that someone was watching my every step. The 40 elephants were like shadows, and that's how the world saw us, as something insignificant, disappearing into the night. We weren't criminals in the traditional sense, but our work was much more sophisticated. We didn't just steal material things. We stole trust. We stole illusions. We were masters of manipulation, and our art lay in taking what we needed without leaving a trace. That evening, we received an assignment. Mary met us in a secluded spot, as always, calm but stern. She said nothing, but her gaze spoke volumes. We knew she trusted us. We were a team, and each of us knew our role. Mary never interfered with the process. She was like a puppeteer, watching her puppets move from the shadows. I remember how we made our way toward the target. We walked through dark alleys, careful not to attract attention. Even our steps were calculated. We couldn't afford to be noticed. The sounds of the evening city filled the streets. Music from pubs, the chatter of passers-by, the clink of glass bottles. But for us, it was all background noise. We were part of the night. The shop we were headed for was old, with dim windows and weathered glass. It seemed insignificant against the backdrop of the sprawling city, but it was in places like this that treasures were hidden, forgotten things that could become valuable at the right moment. We were always searching for such places, nondescript, yet full of potential. When we reached the shop, I felt a subtle unease. It was too simple, too obvious to be safe. Mary didn't like assignments like this. She always said that if something seemed too obvious, it usually wasn't. But despite this, she didn't say a word. We were ready, and that was what mattered. We paused in front of the door. I remembered her words. Remember, stealth is not just in the body, but in the mind. The one who hesitates has already lost. Mary always knew how to make us think as one, as a machine, working in perfect unison. And at that moment, I felt it. I was part of something much bigger than just women entering a shop. Mary gave us a brief nod, and we moved forward. The door creaked open slowly, barely a sound to disturb the stillness of the night. We slipped inside like shadows, blending into the darkness of the shop. The air inside was thick with the smell of old wood and dust, a place that had long been forgotten by most. But to us, it was the perfect environment. A place where we could disappear and yet take what we needed, all without anyone even noticing. I paused for a moment, my senses heightened. The faintest noise echoed through the store, a rustle of paper, the soft thud of something shifting. My eyes darted to the corners of the room, ensuring there were no surprises lurking in the shadows. But everything seemed calm, almost too calm. The atmosphere in here was like the eye of a storm, still, but with a quiet tension that could snap at any moment. I glanced at the other women. There were 4 of us in total tonight, each of us experts in our own way. We were a well-oiled machine, each part moving in sync, each woman playing her role without question. It was the beauty of our group. Trust was not something that had to be spoken. It was understood. Mary stood in the corner, her presence almost invisible in the gloom. She wasn't the type to give orders during a job. She never needed to. Her strength lay in her ability to make us feel confident in ourselves, to let us carry out the plan with the quiet assurance that we were all part of something bigger. Her eyes flicked toward the back of the shop, a silent signal that the task was about to begin. I moved towards the counter, my footsteps light, almost inaudible on the worn floorboards. The man behind the counter was an older figure, hunched over a stack of papers. He hadn't noticed us yet. Perfect. His focus was on whatever trivial matter he was working on, his back turned to the door as if the world outside didn't exist. I studied him for a moment, a thin smile tugging at the corner of my lips. This man, like most, didn't even know we were there. He wasn't even aware that his reality was about to be altered. We were invisible to him, and that, in this moment, was our power. There was a small, delicate hum of tension in the air now. I could feel it in my chest, a quickening of my heartbeat that matched the rhythm of my thoughts. This was when the art of our work began, when the subtlety of each motion counted. I knew what needed to be done, and I had to do it without a second thought. There was no room for hesitation. As I approached the counter, my hand brushed lightly against the edge, the touch almost imperceptible. A subtle gesture, unnoticed by the man, but I felt it. It was like stepping into a different world, one where time slowed, where every movement became deliberate and meaningful. I let my fingers hover for just a moment longer than necessary, feeling the texture of the wood beneath my skin. This wasn't just about the theft. It was about the moment when I truly became part of the shop, when I made it mine. The man was still focused on his work, unaware of the shift happening right in front of him. With one fluid motion, I slipped my hand into his pocket, my fingers grazing the fabric of his coat. The sensation of contact was brief, but in that moment, I knew I had everything I needed. It wasn't just about taking something material. It was about becoming a part of his world without him even realizing it. The feeling of the object in my hand was fleeting, yet significant. As I withdrew, a small smile curled on my lips again. It was so easy, almost too easy, but that was the beauty of it. We didn't need to make noise, didn't need to fight. We took, and in the taking we were free. I took a step back, my body moving with the same quiet grace as before. My heart hadn't even begun to race, not yet. The thrill came later, when we had escaped, when we were far from this place, and it no longer mattered. But here, in the quiet of the shop, it was all about control. We had it. The man finally looked up from his work, but by then, it was too late. His eyes scanned the room, but there was no sign of us. We were ghosts, already gone, already slipping into the shadows. Mary gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time to leave. The job was done. We left the shop as silently as we had entered, the door closing behind us with a soft click that barely disturbed the night. The city was still alive, but it felt distant now. The rush of the heist had faded, and all that remained was the quiet of our steps on the cobblestone streets. I felt the weight of what had just occurred, though there was no outward sign of it. Our movements were deliberate and precise, as though we had done this 1,000 times before, because, in truth, we had. The object I had taken from the man was still tucked safely in my coat pocket. A small, insignificant item to anyone else. To him, it was part of his reality, part of his world that we had silently erased. I could feel its presence there, a reminder that we had altered the course of his night without him ever knowing. The power in that moment, that ability to slip in and out of someone's life without a trace, was intoxicating. As we walked, I glanced over at Mary. She was always the same, calm, collected, her eyes never betraying any hint of emotion. She led us with an almost eerie certainty, her presence so commanding that no one dared question her. I admired her, of course, but in a way, I feared her too. She had an uncanny ability to see things before they happened, to know when to act and when to remain still. It was why she had become our leader, why we all trusted her implicitly. She never had to say much. We understood her without words, a kind of silent language between us all. Tonight had been smooth, almost too smooth. I had that same uneasy feeling again, the one that came whenever things felt too easy. The shadows seemed to press closer, the darkness becoming more suffocating. It wasn't fear exactly, but the awareness that one wrong move could unravel everything. "Stay sharp," Mary's voice cut through the quiet, her words soft but firm. It wasn't a command, but a reminder. We all understood what she meant. In our world, nothing was ever truly safe. There was always someone watching, always someone waiting for us to slip up. The city had a way of making you feel invincible, but that was its trick. It made you forget how fragile everything truly was. As we rounded a corner, I felt the familiar weight of the object in my pocket again. My fingers brushed against it absent-mindedly, as if checking that it was still there. It was a small gesture, almost automatic, but it brought a sense of reassurance. We had done what we set out to do. We were untouchable, invisible, as if we had never been there at all. The others walked in silence, their faces unreadable in the dim light. There was no need for words. We all understood the unspoken bond that connected us. We were more than just a group. We were a family, bound together by necessity and by something deeper, a shared understanding of the world that had shaped us into who we were. The city around us seemed to blur, the sounds of life growing distant. I could feel the familiar rhythm of the night, the pulse of the streets that had become so much a part of me. But there was something else there too, a sense of anticipation, as if the city itself was waiting for something to happen. Mary's steps faltered for a moment, and we all instinctively stopped. The feeling of unease I had been pushing aside, and I saw that it wasn't just me who was on it. The flicker of something, a presence, was in the air. Mary's gaze flicked to the shadows behind us, her eyes narrowing just slightly. We had crossed a place where we didn't belong, a part of the city that felt wrong off center. It was as if the very fabric of the night had shifted, pulling us into something dark. I could hear the sound of footsteps, too close, too deliberate. Someone was calling. It was the first real threat we had faced all night. A calm, calculated atmosphere, so hard to master in this beginning to trust. I felt the others game was finished. We're doing well. Mary's voice was a warning. We all knew what she meant. There was no room for hesitation. We had trust. In an instant, we moved. Our steps quickened, our bodies shifting in perfect synchrony. There was no time to think, only to move. Every motion carefully calculated. We couldn't get turned against us, and now we had to turn it back to our advantage. We ventured a narrow alleyway, the shadows swallowing us whole. I could hear the picture now, almost on top of us. The language of the night, and that was all we needed. Stick to the plan, and we all knew what that meant. We didn't panic. We kept our heads down and our focus set. The city was our playground, and we knew how to use it to disappear. As we rounded another corner, someone was there in the shadows, but it didn't matter. We were already there. The city was following us out each time. We didn't stop. We couldn't afford to. We entered survival mode. The city was set. It didn't matter that the night was the art of disappearing. Right now, someone was punching us and the space had begun. We slipped through the streets with the practiced ease of shadows, each of us instinctively knowing where to go, with hours of pace and hesitation. The world around us, the distant time of city life, the occasional sound, it all faded as we focused on the one thing that mattered. I kept my hand close to my coat pocket, the small object so close. It was a constant reminder of what we had accomplished, but in moments like this, when things got tense, something felt heavier. The thrill of the job seemed distant now, replaced by a cold sense of urgency. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had happened tonight wasn't over yet. We had made a mistake. A misstep somewhere, something had gone wrong. As we turned another corner, I saw the familiar silhouette of the leading us like the calm center of the storm. Her still point in the chaos. She was still she knew what to do when everything else was falling apart. It was why I trusted her, why we all did. She was the reason why we were still alive. Her eyes flicked back. A silent signal passed between us, a warning to stay alert. We were still being followed, but they were getting closer now. I could sense it in the air. Something about this didn't feel right. Whoever was tailing us wasn't just some careless cop or some low-level thug. There was purpose in their pursuit. They knew exactly who they were chasing, and that meant they had been watching us for a while. I went into another narrow passage, my breath quickening as I heard them. This time, they weren't just following. They were closing in. I could feel the sound of their breath, hear the rustle of their clothing as they gained ground. We crossed instinctively, moving silently as we pressed ourselves against the cold stone walls. Every sound felt amplified. The scratch of tears on the pavement, the occasional shout from a distant passerby, the whisper of wind through the hours. All felt like they were screaming too loudly, too clearly. And we were depressed. There was a long pause. For a moment, it was time seemed to stretch, the tension thick enough. I risked a quick glance around the corner. A figure stood there, sitting in the shadow. A tall, broad-shouldered man, his silhouette unmistakable. I couldn't make out his face, but I knew exactly who he was. And worse, he was with someone else, a second man, waiting to be behind him, ready to close the distance if needed. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just some random pursuit. Shit. Mary's voice was with the weight of authority. We moved. It wasn't a command. We had no choice now. There was no escape. We broke from cover in one fluid motion, our bodies flowing into the night sky, darting through the maze of side streets with cautious like we had done 1,000 times before. Something was different. The shadows that usually hit us now felt like they were hurting us. Every sound felt too loud, every footstep too heavy. I heard the shout then. One of them sounded like the street was like thunder. A cacophony of footsteps. But we were faster, and in that, we had reason. We reached the bridge that spanned a small canal. The moonlight glinted off the water below, casting a silvery glow on everything around us. It touched me like the world had paused for a moment, frozen, like there was no time to turn. I could hear the men closing in. Mary didn't hesitate. She sprinted ahead, the movement and the rest of us followed. We knew the plan, even though we had never been together. We needed to get across the bridge. We could disappear into the heart of the city, where there would be no trace of us. But as we reached the midpoint of the bridge, I felt the shift. A sudden pressure in me, like something was about to snap. I glanced over my shoulder, only to see the figure of the first man closing in. His face was now visible in the moonlight, hard-eyed. He wasn't just some street thug. He was someone who had been I turned to Mary, her face a mask of calm determination. We're not getting out of this one. She gazed for a split second, her lips curving into a smile, not without a fight.